Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive.
Yeah.
Today, we're going back to the 18th century,
Ooh,
France, and diving into the world of Montesquieu.
interesting.
Montesquieu was a French philosopher, and his ideas, they still matter today.
Yeah, I think they do.
So to help us with this deep dive, we've got excerpts from a Yale lecture.
Okay.
We've also got his Wikipedia entry and a pretty comprehensive biography.
Nice.
And I know 18th century French philosopher
Right.
doesn't exactly scream exciting,
Yeah.
but Montesquieu was living during a seriously decadent period.
Oh.
Think you know, lavish parties,
Uh-huh.
scandalous affairs,
I'm listening.
you know, all while he's revolutionizing the way we think about government.
It's quite a contrast, isn't it?
So our mission today is twofold.
Okay.
One, we're going to unpack Montesquieu's key contributions to, political and social thought.
Okay.
And then we're going to see how they resonate today.
Got it.
But then also we want to get a little taste of what life was really like in France.
Yeah.
On the eve of revolution.
That sounds like a good plan.
So let's start with the man himself.
Sure.
Our biography paints this really interesting picture.
Okay.
He was born into a noble family, but he wasn't super rich.
Uh-huh.
So he married a wealthy woman.
Yeah, a good move.
Practical.
Very practical.
And then, while his wife was managing their wine business,
Okay.
Montesquieu was off mingling with Parisian high society.
Sounds about right.
He attended salons.
Yeah.
He joined the Freemasons.
Uh-huh.
He even traveled Europe with British lords.
Wow.
And he even sat in on sessions of the English Parliament.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh, and he sold his judicial office
What?
to fund his travels and his writing.
He did.
It kind of makes you wonder what he really thought about those stuffy courtrooms.
Yeah, it does make you wonder.
All of these experiences
Mhm.
obviously shaped his thinking.
Of course.
Being exposed to different types of governments fueled his fascination with comparing political systems.
Uh-huh.
And that's really at the heart of his most influential work, The Spirit of the Laws.
Yeah, it's a big one.
The Spirit of the Laws, it does sound kind of intimidating.
Well, it is. It's a very dense work.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
our Yale professor breaks it down
Okay.
into 3 key ideas
Okay.
that are very relevant today.
All right, let's hear it. What did Montesquieu have to say that still matters centuries later?
Well, firstly, he looked past just the question of who's ruling
Okay.
and focused on how they're ruling.
Okay.
He made a very important distinction between moderate and despotic governments,
Ooh, okay.
which is incredibly potent, I think.
Okay.
If you look at all the political systems today.
So it's not just about, who's in charge,
Right.
but it's how they're using that power.
Exactly.
Can you give an example of, moderate versus despotic?
Sure.
I have a feeling this distinction is kind of key to understanding his philosophy.
Yeah, I think it's very key. Imagine a monarchy.
Okay.
If the monarchy is despotic, the ruler's power is absolute.
Uh-huh.
They rule with fear and oppression.
Okay.
Think of like a tyrant.
Got it.
They eliminate all opposition and only govern for themselves.
Yeah.
But Montesquieu said a monarchy could be moderate.
Okay.
And in this case, the ruler's power would be limited by laws and institutions.
Oh, so like a constitutional monarchy.
Exactly.
That's pretty radical for the time.
Yeah, I think so.
So Montesquieu believes that concentrating power in one person or entity is dangerous.
Yeah.
Regardless of the type of government.
Yeah.
Which brings us to his second big idea, separation of powers.
Yep, a big one.
Yeah, separation of powers, we hear that phrase all the time, especially
Yeah.
when we're talking about democracies.
Right.
But what did Montesquieu actually have in mind?
So he was building on John Locke's ideas,
Okay.
proposing distinct branches of government,
Okay.
legislative, executive, and judicial.
Yeah.
Each one would have checks and balances on the others.
Does that sound familiar?
It should.
Yeah, the American founding fathers.
Big fans.
They loved this whole separation of powers.
Yeah, they did.
Montesquieu's work had a big influence on the framers of the U.S. Constitution.
Yeah, it did.
I mean, the structure of American government
Uh-huh.
owes a lot to his ideas.
For sure.
So if a French philosopher who never even went to America
Right.
helped to shape the political landscape of a future nation,
It's pretty amazing.
that is fascinating.
And it goes beyond America.
Yeah.
These ideas about separation of powers,
Uh-huh.
they're considered fundamental
Yeah.
to democracies all over the world.
Okay, so I'm starting to get it.
Good.
But there was a third key idea.
Oh, yeah?
What else did he have to say that was so important?
Well, this might surprise you.
Okay.
Montesquieu said that climate and geography
What?
could actually influence social structures and individual behavior.
Really?
And he was saying this
Wow!
way before the idea of ecology even existed.
So he was like an early environmentalist.
Yeah, I think you could say that.
That is really ahead of his time.
Yeah.
But can you give me some examples?
Yeah.
How could climate affect society?
Well, okay, so some of his examples might seem a little bit simplistic today,
Yeah.
but he said that warmer climates
Uh-huh.
led to more passive societies,
Oh.
and colder climates fostered more independence and individual liberty.
Mm.
But his bigger point is that we are shaped by our environment.
Yeah.
And that's still relevant.
Yeah.
I mean, think about how many different cultures have evolved all over the world.
All right, my mind is a little blown.
Yeah.
We have this guy living in a world of powdered wigs and palaces,
Yeah.
but he's making these observations about government and society that we're still talking about today.
It's pretty remarkable.
It's pretty amazing. But we can't forget about the backdrop.
Right.
Pre-revolutionary France.
Of course.
You know, Montesquieu wasn't just writing in a vacuum.
Yeah.
You know, he was surrounded by a society that
Right.
was undergoing some serious changes.
Yeah.
So what was France like in the 18th century?
It was lively.
Life.
Okay, Louis XIV,
Mm-hmm.
the Sun King,
Yeah.
had just died.
Okay.
And he left behind, this legacy of absolute monarchy.
Yeah.
But it were starting to be cracks in the system.
Okay, so the seeds of revolution
Yeah.
were starting to be sown.
Yeah.
But what about all this decadence?
Oh, yeah.
Was it really as wild as they say?
Well, let's just say
Okay.
that the 18th century in France
Uh-huh.
was a time of incredible social and moral flexibility.
Uh-huh.
Think scandalous affairs,
Yeah.
powerful mistresses,
Uh-huh.
a general atmosphere of...
Give me some gossip.
Well, okay, Madame de Pompadour.
Who's that?
She was Louis XV mistress,
Okay.
and she was very influential
Oh.
in the king's personal life, but
Yeah.
also in politics and culture.
Wow. I'm getting some serious Dangerous Liaisons vibes.
Me too.
You know, our Yale professor
Uh-huh.
recommended that book.
Yeah.
And the film adaptations.
Yeah.
And now I can see why...
It's pretty amazing.
It's wild to think that Montesquieu was coming up with these ideas,
Yeah.
about government
Yeah.
while all of this was going on around him.
Yeah.
It's like he was trying to write a philosophy dissertation at a wild party.
I love that analogy.
He's really trying to make sense of the world around him.
Yeah.
This mix of intellectual ideas
Yeah.
and pure hedonism.
I know. It really makes you wonder
Yeah.
how he squared his own lifestyle
Yeah.
with, all of his serious intellectual pursuits.
That is a great question.
But maybe that's a conversation for later.
Okay.
Right now, I think we need to talk about
Yeah.
Montesquieu's concept of the general spirit.
The general spirit.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Okay, so Montesquieu believed
Uh-huh.
that every society has these shared ideas and values.
Uh-huh.
And this is what he calls a general spirit.
Okay.
And it shapes how people think and behave.
Okay.
And it goes beyond individual consciousness.
Okay.
It's influenced by things like climate religion laws,
Uh-huh.
even social customs.
Okay.
And he said this general spirit
Yeah.
is what really defines a society.
So we're all swimming
Yeah.
in this sea of shared ideas, and it
Mhm.
influences everything,
Yeah.
from our laws to our art to
Yeah.
just everyday interactions.
Exactly. And that raises a really important question.
Okay.
It's still debated today.
What's up?
How much of who we are
Yeah.
is determined by individual choice
Yeah.
versus how much is shaped by the society that we live in?
That's the classic nature versus nurture.
It is.
But applied to our entire worldview,
Exactly.
where do you think Montesquieu landed on that?
I
Is
know.
he all about, individual agency, or did he believe we're just products of our environment?
It's complicated.
Okay.
And I think Montesquieu's answer is more nuanced
Okay.
than just a simple either or.
Okay.
But I think it's time for a break.
Okay.
When we come back, we'll explore the general spirit more
Okay.
and talk about how it connects to the world today.
All right. Sounds good. We'll
Yeah.
be right back.
Okay.
All right. So this general spirit idea.
Yeah.
It's kind of mind-blowing.
I know, right?
It's like our values, even how we see the world, could be shaped by something we don't even realize.
It's a powerful concept. And it's had a huge impact
Yeah.
on how we think about individuals versus society.
Uh-huh.
In fact, sociologists like Durkheim,
Oh, yeah.
they took Montesquieu's ideas even further
Okay.
and developed them.
Uh-huh.
Durkheim talked about this collective consciousness,
Okay.
which is basically Montesquieu's general spirit.
Got it.
And Durkheim said it was like social glue,
Okay.
binding people together,
Uh-huh.
giving them a sense of belonging.
So Montesquieu's ideas weren't just a one-hit wonder.
No, not at all.
They actually sparked all these conversations about social theory.
Yes, and those conversations
Oh.
are still happening today.
And it makes you wonder,
Yeah,
how does this general spirit play out
right.
in our world,
Yeah, good question.
I mean, we're so interconnected now.
Totally.
More than ever with globalization and all the technology. So does that mean we have like one big general spirit now?
It's possible.
Or does it cause more fragmentation and conflict?
That's a really good question.
On the one hand, we're exposed to so many different cultures and ideas.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, there's this push to conform,
Right.
like everyone has to fit in a certain box.
It's a tough one.
It's like we're stuck between these two opposite forces.
And I think that reflects this tension that's in Montesquieu's work.
Okay.
He saw both sides,
Yeah.
He knew the general spirit could bring people together, but he also thought individual liberty was super important.
Okay.
So he was trying to figure out
Yeah.
how to balance those things.
It's a question we're still asking today.
I agree.
It makes me think about all those debates,
Oh, yeah.
about freedom of speech, cultural diversity, even political polarization.
Right.
Are we actually becoming more tolerant of different viewpoints?
Yeah.
Or are we just retreating into our own little echo chambers?
I mean, it's complicated.
Yeah.
There's no easy answer.
Right.
But I think Montesquieu gives us a way to think about these things.
Okay.
In a more sophisticated way. He reminds us that societies are always changing.
Yeah.
And the general spirit isn't like this fixed thing.
Yeah.
It's always evolving.
Yeah.
Through interactions between individuals and groups.
So there's still hope
That's
for,
right.
Individual freedom and for society to change for the better.
Yes, I think so.
But now curious, how did people react to his ideas back then?
Oh, that's interesting.
I mean, France was an absolute monarchy.
Right.
Was the king happy about separation of powers?
I don't think so.
What about the church?
Probably not.
Did they, all this talk about individual liberty?
Let's just say
Yeah.
Montesquieu's work was controversial.
Okay.
A lot of people read it and talked about it.
Uh-huh.
But the people in power,
Yeah.
they weren't too thrilled.
Not surprising.
Yeah. The spirit of the laws was condemned by the Sorbonne.
What's the Sorbonne?
Basically, a group of theologians in Paris,
Okay.
associate with the University of Paris.
Got it.
And then in 1751,
Uh-huh.
the spirit of the laws was banned.
What?
Yeah, by the Catholic Church.
Oh, wow.
It was put on the index of prohibited books.
Talk about a badge of honor.
Pretty aggressive.
But I guess it makes sense. I mean,
Yeah.
his ideas
Yeah.
challenged the whole idea of absolute monarchy.
Right.
And, the church's authority.
Sure.
Montesquieu said power should be shared, not concentrated.
Uh-huh.
And that people's freedom should be protected.
Right.
From rulers just doing whatever they want.
Exactly. And that was radical in the 18th century.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's still relevant today.
Yeah, I can see that.
When you think about things like government overreach
Uh-huh.
and the erosion of civil liberties.
Okay, so his ideas were controversial in France.
Yeah,
But they ended up influencing the American Revolution.
they did.
How did that happen?
Well, it is pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
But the American colonists,
Yeah.
they were very interested in Enlightenment ideas.
Okay.
And Montesquieu's work
Mm-hmm.
was all over the colonies.
Really?
Yeah, remember those British lords he traveled with?
Oh, yeah.
That network?
Uh-huh.
It stretched across the Atlantic.
Wow.
So as the colonists were thinking about self-government
Okay.
and their own rights,
Uh-huh.
Montesquieu's ideas
Yeah.
really spoke to them.
So basically, Montesquieu gave them a blueprint
Yeah, kind of.
for how to create a government
Yeah,
that was based on liberty and limited government.
right. They found in Montesquieu
Uh-huh.
this idea of a balanced government
Yeah.
with checks and balances.
Uh-huh.
I mean, that's pure Montesquieu.
This is crazy.
I know, right?
This guy was hanging out in salons.
Yeah.
Writing about taste.
Yeah.
And he helped shape the destiny of a whole other country.
Amazing.
Mind-blowing. And it just shows you
Yeah.
how powerful ideas can be.
They really are.
Even centuries later.
I know.
Montesquieu is still inspiring us and challenging us
Absolutely.
to think about government society,
Yeah,
individual liberty.
for sure.
I have to admit, when we started this,
Uh-huh.
I wasn't sure what to expect.
Okay.
18th century French philosopher. Doesn't sound super exciting.
Yeah.
But I've actually been captivated. Montesquieu's life and
Yeah.
ideas, they're way more relevant than I thought.
I know. He's fascinating.
It's been a pleasure talking about him with you.
Likewise.
And I think we've only scratched the surface.
I agree. There's so much more to discover.
Well, unfortunately, we're running out of time. But
Right.
before we go,
Yeah.
I have one last question.
Okay, shoot.
If Montesquieu were alive today,
Yeah?
what do you think he'd say about our world?
Oh, that's a great question.
What would he think about globalization technology?
Right.
All the challenges we're facing.
Well, this brings us to the most important takeaway
Okay.
from our deep dive on Montesquieu.
All right, I'm ready.
He was all about critical thinking,
Okay.
questioning assumptions,
Uh-huh.
and having thoughtful debate.
Yeah.
So I think he'd encourage us
Yeah.
to look at the world today
Yeah.
with that same curiosity and rigor.
So it's not about specific answers.
No,
It's about how we think,
exactly.
about approaching the world with an open mind
Yeah,
and a desire to learn.
that's it.
That's a great point.
Yeah, I think Montesquieu would
Yeah.
remind us that
Uh-huh.
learning is a journey.
Yeah.
It never really ends.
That's a perfect note to end on.
It is.
Before we say au revoir,
Yeah.
do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I do.
For our listeners?
I think if Montesquieu believed that the general spirit becomes more powerful as civilizations progress,
Right.
what does that mean for us?
Yeah.
In our interconnected, globalized world.
Wow, that's a big one.
It is.
Would we all start to have the same values and beliefs, like a global general spirit?
It's possible.
Or would we see even more conflict,
Right.
as different general spirits clash?
That could happen too.
Especially online.
Yeah, it's hard to say for sure.
Right.
But I think Montesquieu would say
Yeah.
we need to be aware of the things that shape how we think,
Yeah.
both as individuals
Uh-huh.
and as a society. He'd say the general spirit isn't fixed.
Got it.
It's always changing
Yeah.
through our interactions, our institutions, our technology.
So we're not just passive. We can actually help shape it.
Exactly. And I think that's what's so powerful
Yeah.
about Montesquieu's ideas.
Yeah.
He's saying we can be critical thinkers, we can question things,
Yeah.
and we can help shape the general spirit.
Wow. I don't know about you, but this deep dive, it's left me feeling stimulated but also overwhelmed.
I know, right?
We've covered so much.
We have.
From those salons in France
Uh-huh.
to Montesquieu's legacy today.
It's been quite a journey.
It really shows how relevant Montesquieu still is.
I agree.
Even though he was writing centuries ago,
Yeah.
his ideas about government, society, human nature,
Yeah.
they still matter today.
Absolutely.
So for our listeners who want to learn more,
Yeah.
I definitely recommend checking out his work.
Yeah. Read the source material.
You might be surprised how relevant it feels.
I know.
Even today.
For sure.
And who knows, maybe you'll discover something new.
Right.
Or challenge your own assumptions.
Exactly.
And maybe even be inspired to help shape the general spirit of our time.
I love it.
That's it for our deep dive into Montesquieu.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on this intellectual adventure.
Thanks, everyone.
Until next time, keep those minds curious.
Yeah.
Keep those questions flowing.
Keep learning.
And keep those deep dives going.
See you next time.
I think what's really striking about Montesquieu is he wasn't just this, armchair philosopher.
Right.
He was really involved in the world around him.
Totally.
Dealing with actual political and social problems.
Yeah.
And that's what makes his work so timeless.
I think so.
He wasn't just, coming up with theories. He was trying to understand how complicated human society really is.
Yeah, and that's reflected in one of his most interesting ideas.
Which is?
The one we talked about before.
Okay.
You know how climate and geography shape us.
Yeah.
But as civilizations get more advanced,
Yeah.
that influence kind of fades away.
Uh-huh.
And then the power of the general spirit
Right.
becomes even stronger.
Okay, so if he were alive today,
Yeah.
what do you think he'd make of that trend?
That's a good question.
Because we're more globalized than ever.
Yeah, we are.
So if he thought the general spirit is the main thing, shaping advanced societies, what does that mean for us now?
I mean, it's pretty fascinating to think about,
Yeah.
what kind of general spirit
Right.
would even emerge
Yeah.
in a world where, physical boundaries
Yeah.
don't matter as much anymore.
Would we all start to have the same values?
I mean, it's possible.
Like a global general spirit?
It could happen.
Or would we see even more division and fighting
That's also possible.
as different general spirits clash?
Especially online.
Yeah,
It's tough to say for sure.
Right.
But I think Montesquieu would say
Yeah.
that we need to be really aware of the things that shape how we think,
Okay. Yeah.
both personally and as a society.
Okay, so the general spirit isn't fixed.
Right.
It's always
It's
changing
dramatic.
based on how we interact, the institutions we create,
Right.
even our technology.
Exactly.
So we're not just along for the ride.
Yep.
We're actually helping to shape it.
Yes, and I think that's the most important thing about
Yeah.
Montesquieu's ideas.
Okay.
He's saying we can be critical thinkers, we can question things,
Yeah.
and we can play a role in shaping the general spirit.
Wow, I gotta say,
Yeah.
this deep dive has left me feeling intellectually energized,
Yeah.
but also a little bit overwhelmed.
I know you mean.
We've covered so much,
Yeah.
from those salons in France to Montesquieu's impact today.
It's been a journey.
It really shows how relevant Montesquieu still is.
Absolutely.
Even though he lived centuries ago,
I know.
his ideas about government, society,
Right.
human nature, they still matter.
They really do.
So to our listeners,
Yeah.
if you want to learn more, I highly recommend
Yeah.
checking out his work.
Go read the source material.
I think you'll be surprised how relevant it feels.
I know.
Even today, you
Yeah.
might discover something new,
Right.
or maybe challenge your own assumptions,
Yeah.
and maybe even be inspired
Uh-huh.
to help shape the general spirit of our time.
It's a great way to put it.
Well, that's all the time we have
All right.
for our deep dive into the world of Montesquieu.
It's been fun.
Thanks for joining us
Thanks, everybody.
on this intellectual adventure.
Yeah.
Until next time, keep those minds curious.
Keep learning.
Keep those questions flowing.
Yeah.
And keep those deep dives going.
See you next time.